Chapter 40 is a remarkably deep chapter, but the story itself is pretty quick. So we may just overview the story and come back for the depth later. That's what we're going to be working on. Let's pray and we'll dig in. I thank you, Lord, for these words that you've recorded for us for all time. How I pray that we would listen, that you would teach, that we would hear more than just the words that I say, but we would hear from your Spirit. We thank you. Amen. So we've already learned a lot from Joseph. We have seen that Joseph serves the purpose of painting the picture of the Messiah. Joseph serves as kind of a type of the coming Christ. He was the beloved son of the Father. He was sent into a dangerous area to lead his brothers back home, his brothers that were in rebellion against the Father. He was rejected by those brothers, put into a pit in the ground, and then sent to Egypt and trapped there. But in so doing, he became the Savior of the world. So there are some real parallels there that we've discussed. We've also seen how Joseph serves as an example to us of how to be victorious and successful regardless of situation. We talked on Sunday about the fact that there is an adversary who wants to take us down. And this adversary worked incredibly hard on Joseph. Imagine the stakes, what Joseph and the adversary were fighting for, whether Joseph knew it or not. Remember Genesis chapter 3. There would come a man who would crush the head of the serpent. There would be one, an unusual man, a man born of a woman without a man sent directly from God, whose death would bring for the poor and lowly relief and comfort. And we're told in Genesis 3 that he would do that. It would bruise his heel, but he would crush the head of the serpent. That when this promised one came, the serpent was done. Well, that serpent, of course, is the picture of our adversary, who we call Satan, Hasatan. It's just a word that means the accuser. This one who is the accuser, who is the adversary, had been trying to thwart this plan since the very beginning, as we've talked for some time. The adversary heard that this plan was given as a promise to Abraham, that Abraham would have a son, that his son would go on to become a great nation that would possess the land, and from this nation would come the Blessed One. And of course, the adversary tried to get in the middle of that with Hagar and Ishmael, just a number of problems. But of course, Isaac was born, the promise was given to him, the Blessed One would come from him. Then Jacob and Esau are born. Once again, the adversary tries to get in the middle of that, but yet God saves the plan when he saves Jacob, gives Jacob the name of Israel, governed by God, prince of God. He wrestled with God but was overcome. That guy, now he's got the plan. Jacob has 12 sons. The adversary went after each one of them. We don't know a lot about Benjamin, but of the 10 sons the 11 sons in that case that we do know a lot about, the adversary was perfectly successful with 10 of them. We read about the picture of Judah. Judah, who is to be the ruling tribe. Judah, from whom will come the Blessed One, according to Genesis 49. Boy, was the adversary successful in taking down Judah. He really tried to mess up that family line in some incredible ways. But for the grace and deliverance of God, he would have. Imagine if Satan had been successful taking down Joseph. Remember the purpose of mankind: perfect relationship with God, perfect relationship with one another, perfect relationship with creation. That's what we were made to do. That's the role we were made to fill, to put a smile on God's face through a great relationship with him. Remember how the devil defeated that, and God is rebuilding that. But there's this one very important family through whom comes the rebuilder. What if the old devil could just destroy that whole family in one blow? He's got 10 of the boys. But Joseph is the heir, the prince, the inheritor. And so Satan doubles down on this inheritor. Well, let's just say his plan was foiled. Remember when we first met Joseph? He had well-moisturized hands and a pretty young back. And he wore a fancy coat with big sleeves. He was a dreamer and a supervisor of his brothers. And he was set for big things. Remember when we met him? You know, I was thinking about it again today. I can find myself becoming pretty jealous of the guys who graduated high school really well and went on to college for ministry and got a Master of Divinity and went right into the ministry. They were serving while they were in college, of course, you know, as a youth pastor or young adults pastor or whatever. And then they just started leading churches. And now when they're my age, they've been leading churches for 30 years and they've just never known anything else or done anything else, and they've been remarkably successful and have impacted a lot of people and done a lot of real good for the kingdom, and you know, have been important in the kingdom work. And then there's me. I spent 20 years as a business leader before ministry. And when I finally did start ministry, it was bivocational or trivocational is a little more like it. Usually would take 3 jobs to be able to do ministry. At one time I was doing between 2 and 3 jobs, depending on how you look at it, and full-time at college, getting a bachelor's degree. And then finally, I am appointed senior pastor for the very first time at 39 years old. Wow. I might have been 38. Wendy will correct me. I think I might have been 38. Man, I tell you, I lost 20 years compared to these other guys. But here's the difference. I can balance a checkbook. I can unplug a toilet. I can fix an electrical short before the building burns down. I can lead a team. I can sell you anything. I can come up with creative ways of getting things done that I did not learn at college. Now, yeah, I missed some years. The biggest thing I missed by missing those years, though, was not these capabilities. It was a real problem with pride. I'm not saying I don't have a problem with pride. We all do. But I would have been a monster if I would have just come right out of college ready for the ministry. I would have been an uncontrollably prideful monster. And I would have screwed up a lot of things before getting my head around it. God said, we're not going to do that. You got big enough problems, I'm not letting you near the church until we can begin to control this thing, till we can begin to defeat this thing, begin to prepare you for ministry. So, by the time I started in ministry, I had calloused hands, not smooth hands, and a long resume, not a clean resume. And God has been using every bit of it. Joseph was a young man with great potential, and quite frankly, a little bit of a problem with pride. He was a young man that carried real promises from God. Not just a young man of promise, but with promises from God. But he was not ready for what God had for him. Now, his brothers thought that they had thwarted the plan of the father by selling him into slavery. The brothers thought they had ended the whole thing. Foiled again. Just as God used the work of Satan to do the work of Christ, so he uses the work of these demonically influenced brothers to do the salvific work he'd planned for the people of Israel. Just an amazing, amazing story. Joseph is sold into slavery. Of all the places he could have gone, he goes to Egypt. And of all of the people that he could have ended up with a master, he gets this guy named Potiphar. Chapter 39, verse 1. Now Joseph had been taken to Egypt. An Egyptian named Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guards, bought him from the Ishmaelites who'd brought him there. Potiphar is wealthy, powerful, and well-connected. He is the captain of the guard. To put that in slightly modern terms, he was the head of Secret Service, as it were. Also, he was the leader of an elite group of soldiers that would go and fight on behalf of Pharaoh, not just in any battle, but in specific battles at specific times. He was responsible for the safety of the palace and of the capital city and of Pharaoh himself, Potiphar. This is who ends up with Joseph. Now, Egypt, you got to understand, Egypt was the biggest world power at the time, the top economy in the world. In relative terms, much bigger and more influential than even the United States. Certainly, there was a Hittite empire. They had a vast army, an amazing record-keeping system. I mean, second to none record-keeping system. And of course, there was the Mesopotamian Empire, which was kind of fallen apart at this time, but was still a huge economic powerhouse. But here's the deal. Egypt controlled the food supply in the world because they had the Nile, and the Nile was predictable, and the grain that came from the Nile was predictable. They didn't have that around the northern Mediterranean, southern European region where the Hittites were. They hadn't quite figured that out yet in Asia. Well, we're still a lot of expansion going eastward in Asia, heading toward the east coast where it's now China and Japan and Korea and these kinds of things. They hadn't settled these areas like they have now and figured out rice production like they did. Egypt had a stranglehold on the economy because they had a stranglehold on food. Now, that's not as much of a big problem now. A lot of nations have figured out how to produce food, and quite well, even better than the Egyptians. But imagine if the United States were still the one nation on earth with a massive manufacturing capacity, or a complete and total stranglehold on technology. If we were the only ones who could manufacture cars and toothbrushes at the rate that we do, and the only ones who understood transistors and microchips, I mean, we'd rule the world. Now, I'm not saying that would be a good thing, and I'm not saying it should be that way. It certainly wasn't a good thing for Egypt, who had modern technology wrapped up. Well, it might have been a good thing for Egypt, but it wasn't a good thing for the rest of the world. This is where Joseph went, and he becomes the slave of somebody that was exceptionally high-ranking. I mean, the president's cabinet, the king's cabinet, really, of this guy in Egypt. Who's the Pharaoh? Hey, we'll talk about him if we get that far. We know who he was, and I'll show you why if we get that far. Now, verse 2 is really good. I love the opening part of verse 2. The Lord was with Joseph. Wow, that's cool. Notice it's the Lord, Yahweh, personal name. Not just God was watching over him, God was taking care of him, but there is a personal connection here between God and Joseph. Wow, why is that? What about the other 10 brothers? Why didn't the other 10 brothers have this personal connection? Is God really playing that big of favorites that he doesn't care about any of Jacob's other kids? Why is it just Joseph? I'll tell you why. James 4:8. Anybody know James 4:8? Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Joseph, from the time he was little, had been hearing the stories of Yahweh God. Listen, that was his role in the family. Don't you remember? The great-grandfather, the grandfather, the father, they sit with the inheriting son and they tell him the stories word for word. He is required to repeat them back, not only word for word, but inflection for inflection. He's required to repeat back exactly what they tell him, flawlessly. For 17 years of Joseph's life, that's what he did. There weren't that many stories by the time he was 17. He had it all memorized. He had heard about how God had provided for Adam and for Enoch and for Noah, his ancestor Noah. He could tell you that Noah was his, great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. He had heard about Abraham and the great promises. He may have known, he likely knew Isaac, his grandfather. He likely heard these stories from Isaac that he'd also heard from his father Jacob, Israel. He could repeat, he'd heard these stories. And because he'd heard these stories, he made the choice to identify himself with Yahweh God. I belong to Yahweh God. I depend on Yahweh God. And if Yahweh God could carry Abraham out of Ur of the Chaldeans and through all his troubles, and if Yahweh God could protect Isaac through troubles, some of which we know and some of which we don't, and if Yahweh God could guard Jacob of all people and bring him back and make him successful and become his God, then Yahweh God was good enough for Joseph. Tell you what, parents and grandparents, they can never hear the stories enough. And not just the stories of the Bible. Oh, these parents, well, my kids need to go to Sunday school. I remember I had one parishioner family in one church that brought their kids to church there and even attended church themselves, not because they felt like they needed it, no, because their kids needed to hear those Bible stories for the moral foundation. No, the kids need to hear the Bible stories. But they need to hear your stories and your moms and dads' stories and their moms and dads' stories and their moms and dads' stories, the best you know. They need to know, yeah, God was faithful to all these people on the pages, but God was also faithful to me when you were growing up. And God was faithful to your grandpa when I was growing up, and to your great-grandma when he was growing up. They need to hear the story so many times that, yes, I know, Grandpa. Well, I'm going to tell you again, so sit down. They need to hear the stories. Joseph had heard the stories, and he decided, that is for me. He was depending on Yahweh God. And so Yahweh God was able to draw near to him. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. Last time we saw Joseph, he's referred to as a young man. That's a different word. Now, as he grows up, he is becoming truly successful as he is serving in the household of his Egyptian master. Now, when his master saw that the Lord was with him, that Yahweh was with him, how did his master know it was Yahweh that was with him? Well, Joseph told him. Joseph, you're doing a good job. Hey, I appreciate that. Honestly, I'm just depending on my God. Oh, who is your God? Ra, the sun god? No. My God is Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews. Potiphar says, I don't care who your God is. You're doing a good job, so let's keep it up. When he saw that Yahweh was with him and that the Lord made everything he did successful, Joseph found favor with his master and became his, hard word, don't have an equivalent for it. Here it says personal attendant. If you have a King James, it says butler. Basically became his go-to guy in all things. The phone rings. It's for Potiphar. Just give it to Joseph. I don't have time to talk on the phone right now. Oh, I got to go to a meeting and sign some documents. I don't have time to go to a meeting and sign some documents. Send Joseph. He can sign the documents for me. That's good enough. You get this thing? You get this picture? Not only that, but Potiphar also put him in charge of his household and placed all that he owned under his authority. His household just doesn't mean the place he lives. It means everything that he owns and everything that he is. So yes, his house, all of the people that worked for him, all of the other employees and slaves that he had, all of the businesses that he was a part of. Maybe Potiphar owned a couple of Taco Bell franchises. Well, he's over those franchises. We're going to read here in just a moment that the Lord's blessing was all he's owned in his house and in his fields. That would be any investments, any business dealings. Joseph starts out as just a slave, polishing shoes. A few years later, he is in charge of this vast business empire. You guys know how wealthy senators and congressmen and the head of the Department of Defense and these kind of people get? I mean, listen, we know they're doing it illegally. There's no argument about that. Everybody knows this. It's just that nobody can stop it or is willing to at this point. Well, think about how wealthy you would get if you could do that legally. If you could use your position of being close to the president to get wealthy legally. Well, this guy is side by side with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, the largest empire on the planet at the time, the most powerful empire on the planet at the time. And he can use that position to get wealthy legally. And Joseph's in charge of all of it. And with Joseph in charge, his estate is growing by leaps and bounds. From the time that he put him in charge of his household and all that he owned, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's household because of Joseph. The Lord's blessing was on all he owned in his house and in his fields. He left all that he owned under Joseph's authority. He didn't concern himself with anything except the food he ate. The only thing he had a say in his household, the only thing he wanted to have a say in was dinner. Apparently, he had different tastes than Joseph. I don't like that Hebrew food. Bring me something Egyptian. Great. That was the only thing he cared about. Can't you see this guy comes home, he's been gone for 2 weeks, he walks in the door, he doesn't even want to see the balance sheets. He didn't care. When's dinner? Is all he worries about. That's pretty cool. And he knows it's because Joseph is blessed by Yahweh God. That's awesome. What an incredible witness. Don't you think that all of us who follow Yahweh God should bring that kind of witness to the places where we work? I mean, you may not be able to have this great of an influence over your office or gas station or convenience store or bricklaying enterprise. Man, I think Christians should be sought after as employees. I think they should be every bit as industrious as Joseph. I think they should have every bit the integrity that Joseph has, that their employers know that they can trust them with anything. And when that guy or girl's here, I don't have to worry about anything. I can trust these people. And why? Well, it's because I follow Jesus. Because yes, you sign my paycheck, but I work for Christ. Man, I think, I got to tell you, I got to be honest. There are employers that avoid hiring people who say things like that because they know that those employees are going to be lazy and try to work the system. That's wrong. Christian people should be the most sought after of employees because we do. We work for Christ. That's what Paul tells us. Anything you do in word or deed, do it as if you're working for the Lord. Scrubbing toilets? Jesus is using this toilet next, so I'm going to make sure it's right on. Making school lunches, that bad-tasting cardboard square pizza? Well, Jesus is going to be eating lunch today in the cafeteria, so I'm going to make sure, I don't know which piece of pizza he's getting, so I'm going to make sure they are all right on. Yeah. Well, that's what Joseph is doing, and it's working wonderfully right up until the second half of verse 6. Now, Joseph was well-built and handsome, and after some time, his master's wife looked longingly at Joseph and said, "Sleep with me." Now, we talked about this at length on Sunday, and I don't want to necessarily go back over it. But if you have not seen or heard that Sunday sermon, please, it's on YouTube. Look it up. I got to tell you, that's got, in my mind, one of the most influential sermons to me that I have preached in some time. Oh, we talked about, the history here and who this Mrs. Potiphar was and why she was the way she was and the problems that it posed within the household. We talked about how Joseph would have been very tempted by her, the young man that he was, and quite frankly, the young lady that she was. How this was not something that she was just some dirty old hag and he was just trying to avoid her with all that he was worth because she was disgusting. This was real, genuine temptation. Satan had tried everything he could to take down Joseph. Now he's got both barrels in both hands, and he's coming for him with the one thing that he knows will take down any young man. But somehow, verse 8, Joseph refused. "Look," he said to his master's wife, "with me here, my master doesn't concern himself with anything in his house, and all that he owns is under my authority. No one in this household is greater than I am. He has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife." There's the implication there that Pharaoh has told Joseph that if he wants, he can have any of the women in the household except this one. Interesting, because you are his wife. So how could I do this immense evil? And here it is, the key. How could I do this immense evil and sin against God? We talked about this on Sunday. Joseph employs a 4-step strategy to avoid this temptation. And it is something you can memorize, and it is something you can use anytime you are tempted, whether it's in the way that Joseph is being tempted, or whether you're just tempted to pick up a blizzard on the way home and break your diet. You can use this system that Joseph uses. It's an acronym, and I told you the acronym is FEAR. Why fear? I thought we weren't supposed to fear. Oh, we are supposed to fear the one who can destroy the body and the soul. When you are tempted, remember, I should be afraid, because if I fall to this temptation, I could be destroyed. Even just except a little. I should be afraid. Fear. F, focus. We see that Joseph is focused on God. How could I do this immense evil and sin against God? His focus is not on himself. That's what gets us into trouble. We focus on ourselves. Oh, but I'd really like a blizzard. I mean, I haven't had a treat all day. Nobody brought me any treats today. I deserve a treat. I. Well, I'm not focused on me. I'm focused on the people around me and how they treat me. If you're focused on yourself, you have already failed if your focus is on God, knowing that the intent of God is to have an amazing relationship with you, a perfect relationship, you and God. And that sinning is not violating a rule of God, it's breaking that relationship. No, I want to draw near to him. I want him to be able to bless me in all things like he has Joseph. So focus on God. Verse 10. Actually, we got to skip to verse 11. Now, one day he went into the house to do his work, and none of the household servants were there. We extrapolated from that on Sunday that he had asked, or I use the word entreat, the household servants to help. Keep her away from me. She's a crazy woman. Keep her away. And they knew her, and they knew how she was, and they helped Joseph. Ask for help. Who do we ask? First, we ask God for help. I showed you that on Sunday. Secondly, we ask one another. We tell one another when we're struggling, what we're struggling with, so that we can be free from that thing. That's why James says, confess your sins to one another and be healed. Not so you can say, oh, listen to how bad I was. Or you can say, forgive me, Father, it's been 3 weeks. No. So you can say, I'm really struggling in this area. Can you come? Listen, I so want to stop for a blizzard on the way home. Can I ride with you so that I don't? You see, entreat. F-E-A, avoid, verse 10. Although she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. Avoid. Just get away from it. If you know this thing, listen, if that blizzard is really calling your name and you can't have that because you just had surgery, then you got to avoid that thing. And you know that if you go down 10th Street, your normal way home, you drive right by Dairy Queen. Well, then go 2 streets over and go down 12th Street. Avoid it. And then finally, one day he went in to do his work. None of the household servants were there. Verse 10, she grabbed him by his garment and said, sleep with me. But leaving his garment in her hand, he escaped and ran outside. Run. Somebody's like, hey, I'll drive you home. Oh, hey, let's stop at Dairy Queen. You know what? I'm jogging the rest of the way. Thanks. Run. Avoid it. Now, she has his coat or his outer garment. It's hot there. A lot of times servants didn't wear shirts. A lot of times the important Egyptian men didn't wear shirts. Matter of fact, I'll tell you later who the Pharaoh is, but if you go and look him up, you'll find that all of the both hieroglyphic drawings and like the busts and sphinx that we have, they represent this guy have no shirt. So it's possible this was a garment that was only around his waist. It could have been the only thing he was wearing. She grabs it. It's not like your Sunday school picture where she grabs him by the coat and he runs out fully clothed. She grabs it and said, imagine what she's grabbing here. Come on, let's go. He says, no. And he wiggles out of his clothes and runs. And now she has that. that very sensitive garment. Now she is mad. I listened to a few different modern speakers on this section, as well as looking at some other commentaries, and a number of them said, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." I think even McGee made some statement about that. Anyway, she is mad when she saw that he had left his garment with her and run outside, when he would rather run naked than be with her. She is so hurt and so angry that verse 14, she called her household servants and said, "Look, my husband bought a Hebrew man to make fools of us," literally to make sport of us, or so that he could use us for his pleasure. "He came to me so that he could sleep with me, and I screamed as loud as I could. When he heard me screaming for help, he left his garment beside me and ran outside." Okay, do you think anybody heard her scream as loud as she could? Because look, when she saw that he ran outside, she called her household servants. That indicates saying something like, "Oh, hey, Steve, come here." But she says, "I screamed as loud as I could." There's actually a law that she's referring to, and it's going to be in the Levitical law pretty soon. And it's a law that's there to protect young ladies who are found to be pregnant or have some other similar related issue before they are married. Because if they are, and the young lady says, "I was raped," and they identify the man that supposedly raped them, or say, "I don't know his name, but this was who he was," kind of a thing. There was a law that was designed to protect them. And the law was this: if she is in the city and somebody goes to rape her, or does, and she screams, others will hear her and she's off the hook. If she is in the country, she is to scream as loud as she can as well. This became, the girls were trained in this. This is self-defense. They were trained to, whenever they felt someone was treating them inappropriately, scream as loud as they could. Can you imagine second grade? Scream as loud as they could. And here's the cool thing, and in Leviticus, they take it one step further. If she is in the city and she screams as loud as she can, she's off the hook. She is innocent. She's completely innocent. The guy is 100% guilty, regardless of any discussion of consent ahead of time. If she's out in the country and she screams, but nobody's around and nobody hears her, guess what? She's still innocent. She gets the benefit of the doubt. There was no other society at the time that would give a woman, especially a young unmarried woman, the benefit of the doubt. But God did that for protection for her. At this time, though, the law laid in place that if the woman screamed, she's free of all guilt, should she have been involved in something. And so Mrs. Potiphar lies and says, "I screamed as loud as I could. He left his garment beside me and ran outside." Verse 16. She put Joseph's garment beside her until his master came home. Now, I learned that he's at work, and this happened, maybe right after lunchtime, and he gets home about 5:30 for dinner. He could have been gone for a couple weeks. He could have been on some campaign and gone for a month or more. And the whole time, Joseph just diligently does his job, knowing what's waiting for him. Do you know the penalty for an Egyptian slave who commits any kind of heinous sin against his master? Any kind of thievery or underhandedness, or takes one of his master's women for himself? Do you know the penalty for that? It is immediate execution. If it is heinous enough, which in this case toward the master's wife, and not just any master, but a man this big, the penalty is not only immediate execution, it is public, torturous execution. Because we're going to make an example out of this guy so that no other slave in Egypt acts like this. This is what's waiting for him. Well, verse 19. When his master heard the story his wife told him, "These are the things your slave did to me," he was furious and had him painfully, publicly executed. No. He was furious and had him thrown into prison where the king's prisoners were confined. That would be the prison that this man, the captain of the guard, oversaw. the warden of that prison would have been one of his underlings. I mean, if he's the captain of the guard and he's, say, an admiral, the warden would have been, say, a lieutenant commander that served at his discretion. Why? Why didn't he just execute Joseph? I mean, that's not only the practice, but the law. Execute your slaves when they act like this. Was he not mad? Oh, he was furious. I postulate. At whom was he furious? I don't think it was Joseph. I think he'd about had enough of Mrs. Potiphar. I think he was aware of her reputation. I think he was aware that she was a massive pain in the neck. I think he was tired of her screwing things up in his household. Joseph is the best thing that has ever happened to his household. And she, in her selfishness, screwed it up. Why doesn't he just dump her? He can't. She was given to him as a wife, and since he is so powerful and important, she is the daughter of someone also powerful and important in that society, and she was likely given to him as a wife by Pharaoh. There's nothing he could do about it. He just has to put up with her. I find it striking that there is no record of this man ever having children. Wonder why? Wonder why? Interesting. Well, so I thought I was going to get through 2 chapters tonight. So don't laugh at me. So Joseph was there in prison, but the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him. Don't you love that? So Joseph was there in prison. I mean, come on, that stinks. But the Lord was there and extended kindness. That is the word hesed. That is that loving kindness that only comes from God. That is that special type of agape that's included with tenderness and faithfulness. Like a never-failing faithfulness and a continual tenderness and an always giving that only God has, that nobody else, you don't hear about anybody else extending hesed. It's a kind of love that we can try to imitate, that Hosea is told to try to imitate toward his wife Gomer, but only God. It's such an incredible kind of love. The Lord was with Joseph and lavished this love on him, John would tell us in chapter 3 of 1 John. Just lavished it on him. Even though he's in prison, he feels the love of God being poured on him. Verse 22, the warden put all the prisoners who were in prison under Joseph's authority, and he was responsible for everything that was done there. Did you ever wonder why the warden did that? Who's the warden? It's lieutenant commander. Who's his boss? Potiphar. I can't believe I have to give this guy up. But if I have to give this guy up, listen to me, lieutenant commander. Go sit in your office and put him in charge, because we're never going to have a better prison. The warden did not bother with anything under Joseph's authority because the Lord was with him. Joseph, how are you doing such a good job? You've never even been a prison warden. Well, I got to tell you, Yahweh God. And the Lord made everything he did successful. You can almost see this prison running a profit now. All the people are happy. No more uprisings. Oh, that's good. That's good stuff, and we can keep going. Oh, I skipped this, and I can't skip this because I have a young man here tonight who needs to hear this, and hopefully people on the internet, and hopefully others. I didn't want to skip this part about Mrs. Potiphar. Did you know, Tim knows this, Tom knows this, Mike knows this. Did you know, young men, that the woman you choose to marry will either make or break you? She will not simply add to your life. She will not simply, do the wifely, womanly stuff while you do the manly, guily stuff and everything's great. She will make or break you. She will either cause you to be successful in life, or she will cause you to be a massive failure. Now, some of that is your responsibility. There was a famous Christian psychologist and marriage counselor and author. When I was preparing to get married, 173 years ago. And this guy pointed out that when you first get married, your wife brings baggage from her growing up. Doesn't matter how good it was, she always brings baggage. It's okay. She does. And there may be things about her and the way that she responds to different things that you don't like. Those first 5 years, you can blame that on her mom and dad. After that, it's all you. It's all you. It's your fault. If your wife turns into a nagging, bitter hag, congratulations. You helped with that. Now, see, I don't have to address the young ladies because they already know this. The ladies not only know that they can make or break a guy, they also know that the man that they choose will make or break them. They know this. They know this. They are smart enough. Even today's modern woman, career woman, knows that if she marries a dork, she's in for it. Some of them do anyway. I don't understand that. Some of them know this guy's an idiot and marry him anyway. They think they can change him. Whatever. But young men, you need to know how vital it is that you choose wisely. It's all over the Bible. Proverbs 21:9, it's better to live in a corner of a housetop than in the house shared with a quarrelsome or nagging wife. It's better to live on the roof, to go claim a corner of the roof for yourself, than live with a nagging or quarrelsome wife. Conversely, Proverbs 31, an excellent wife who can find? Boy, you got to look hard for a good one because she is far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. Not because of anything he's done, but because he picked a good one. Proverbs 19, a foolish son is ruin to his father. Oh, we have seen fathers whose hearts are broken because their sons turned out to be idiots. I remember having a conversation with a guy that I know really well, whose kids are interesting, and he just so brokenly told me how his children turned out. A foolish son is ruin to his father, and a wife's quarreling is a continual dripping. Wow. Oh, I get really annoyed by those little noises like that. I'll just go insane. I'll just stop that. Yep, a wife's quarreling. But Proverbs 12, an excellent wife is the crown of her husband. Isn't that good? The crown of her husband. But she who brings shame is like rottenness in his bones. Wow. The Bible don't mince no words. Potiphar got stuck with a wife that was like rottenness in his bones. Yeah. And as a result, Joseph ends up in prison. He loses out. Now, what would you do if you are Joseph? You were taken from your family. You were the prince. You were taken from your family by your brothers, no less. You were sold into slavery. The people who carried you as slaves were a combination of foreigners and extended family members. They brought you down to Egypt and sold you as a slave. But although you are in iron chains, God has taken care of you and blessed you. And now you have this great position. But now, through no fault of your own, as a matter of fact, not only are you not at fault, you did everything right. Now you are in prison. What would you do? Would you get depressed? Probably my default right there. Would you get angry? Would you become withdrawn? Or would you become a problem? Or would you sit around and it's not my fault, I'm innocent, just like everybody else in jail? Have you ever met anybody in jail that was like, yeah, I'm guilty? They are all innocent. Not all, I'm being facetious. I have talked to people who owned up to it, but just the same, Joseph, he could have been like, yeah, I didn't do it, man. I didn't do it. What does it matter with this guy? Is he just a naturally happy fellow? No, the Lord is with him. Remember hearing a story about this couple driving down the street one time? They'd been married a long time. They had a bench seat in the front of their car. Remember bench seats? They had a bench seat in their car, and they're driving along, and he's just doing the driving, and he's got his hand over the seat, and she's sitting over by the door. And she says to him, "Oh, honey, don't you remember when we were first married? Don't you remember how when we went down the road in the car, we would always sit side by side, and your hand would always be around my shoulder?" And he said, "Yeah, I remember that well." And she says, "Oh, honey, what happened?" And he said, "I'm not the one who moved." Joseph did not move. Though the situation changed, he stayed close, and he worked hard in that situation, and he won. We're not going to have a lot of time tonight, so I want to make the comment that there is a supremely deep picture in Genesis chapter 40. It's nothing that I made up. It's nothing that people haven't known was there for thousands of years. It took until Thursday, before the death of Christ, that the picture was understood. We'll talk about it, maybe on a Sunday morning. It is so important and so valuable. And we're just not going to look into it tonight. We're just not going to dig. You can start digging through. You're going to find it there. But we're not going to look into it tonight. We're just going to talk about the story. Oh, but it's just, it seriously puts me in tears to go through the depth of it. So we'll look at it on Sunday. Not this Sunday. We've got a missionary this Sunday. You should be here. After this, after everything is successful, Joseph's been in jail for a while. Best we can tell, there's about 10 years that go by between going to Potiphar's house and getting out of jail. So we don't know how much of which. Best we can tell, roughly 10 years. Could be more, probably not less. After this, the king of Egypt's cupbearer and baker offended their master, the king of Egypt. Do you know the jobs of the cupbearer and the baker? The cupbearer is literally part of the Secret Service, if you will. Oh, well, he's the one who brings the king his cup of wine. That is correct. His job was to look over everything that went before the king and to make sure it was healthy, to the point of tasting his food to see if he would die, and if the cupbearer lived, then it's not poison. So he has a vested interest in making sure that the people who are making the food are making it right? He has a vested interest in the security of the kitchen. He has a vested interest in every bit of the security of Pharaoh. If Pharaoh is going somewhere, the cupbearer goes ahead to make sure that it's safe. Do you see the job this guy has? The cupbearer is so close of a servant to Pharaoh that although he holds no official position, he really is kind of like Pharaoh's chief advisor. To put it somewhat bluntly, when Pharaoh went in to use the restroom, the cupbearer would be called on to assist, if necessary. And in that spot, Pharaoh would think about his issues. I'm sure you've sat there and thought, you might have had some of your best ideas sitting in there and wished you could have bounced it off of somebody. Well, Pharaoh had somebody to bounce it off of. It was the cupbearer, you see. That's how close this guy was. And the baker, he's exactly that. There are two parts of the kitchen. There's a baker and a cooker. And if you don't know the difference, ask Addie. She'll tell you the difference between a baker and a cooker because she keeps reminding me. Well, the baker made the baked goods. What happened? Why did they offend Pharaoh? I have a theory on that. I think the baker made something. Maybe he used a new kind of grain, or maybe he just tried a new recipe. And maybe the cupbearer tried it and brought it before Pharaoh, and maybe it was disgusting. So bad. Maybe Pharaoh was already in a bad mood. Maybe he'd already had enough. You're feeding me this trash, both of you, out of here now. That's my theory. Who was this Pharaoh? I told you we'd get to that. Who was this Pharaoh? His name is Amenemhat. That guy, the second. He reigned from about 1929 BC to about 1875 BC, might have been 22 to 78 BC. He's the third king in the 12th dynasty of Egypt's Middle Kingdom kings. Well, why do we know about that? Well, here's some couple of interesting things about him. First of all, he ruled for about 35 years, which you might know in an Egyptian dynasty is a long time. But we don't have a lot of information about him. We just don't know much about him. Matter of fact, we don't know a whole lot about these early middle kings. We don't know a whole lot about the guys out of this dynasty. There's just not a whole lot that's preserved about them, even though, as we know, the Egyptians were prolific record takers, and they did a lot of big burials with a lot of hieroglyphics and stuff, and we can really count a lot of the history. This guy and the guys around him are just a little bit hard. We have information about him. We know that when he was young, they called him Ameni, which is much easier to understand. His real name was Nubakara, which means golden are the souls of Ra. And we know that before he was officially king, when his father was still on the throne, he was kind of a co-regent. And he did a lot of traveling around, doing ambassador kind of work. And we have records of some of that. Later, he went back to those same countries and wiped them out. But nonetheless, we have records of some of that. But we don't have a lot of records. And here's why. And this gets really interesting. So the dynasties of the kings of Egypt weren't necessarily the children of the king, the children of the king, the children of the king kind of a thing. Or even like in Britain, where maybe a couple families would go back and forth fighting for it. The ones in Egypt, the dynasties were set up by conquerors. So there would be like a coup, if you will, and the family group that won that coup, now they're king for however long. And this particular family group were not Hamitic, they were Semitic. They weren't of the sons of Ham, like Egyptians were at the time. They were of the sons of Shem, like the Hebrews and a number of other tribes. More like the Mesopotamians that were sons of Shem. Interesting. Now, there were many Egyptians who resented the Semitic overlords. And listen, you can really see this. Go look at the mask of this guy, I'll spell his name for you if you want, or the busts of this guy, and compare that to what you see of King Tut, who was very common, right? Or Ramses, look at Ramses. Those guys are Hamitic. They look more African. These guys look more Asian. They were resented by the powerful Egyptian people who got pushed aside because of these Semitic people. So when the fourth dynasty came in, which was after the time of Joseph, Exodus chapter 1, another king came to power who knew not Joseph. When they came in, they wiped out these records. They actually took their buildings that they had made with stone, where all their hieroglyphics were remembering all of their great deeds. They took those buildings apart, stone by stone, turned the stones on their side or backwards, and rebuilt the buildings so those hieroglyphics no longer existed. And we have just very little information about this guy, but the information that we have, that's pretty fantastic. It's pretty fantastic. We know about his Semitic origins. We know about his, I don't know what you want to call it, acceptance, compassion for other Semitic people groups, allowing them to come to Egypt. I mean, bringing in foreigners, aliens, unnecessary immigrants who just mooched off the system. We know that he would do that. We also have this one record, this one complete record that was written by a royal scribe by the name of Samontu. Samontu, who referred to himself as Samontu the Revered, who was a royal scribe. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but he talks about how since he was a child, he was fashioned on the girdle of his majesty, who is this guy, Amenemhat I can't say his name, and who basically worked for him from the time that he was a little kid until the time that the king died. And he talks about how His Majesty praised him on account of all these things. And His Majesty always praised him very greatly. So clearly he thought very highly of himself in this record that he made. And he talks about some of the things that he had His Majesty do, or that His Majesty had him do. He appointed him a scribe of record, which, by the way, he praised him on account of very greatly. And he made me grain registrar in the south and north. That's interesting. Grain registrar. Well, that would be somebody who keeps track of stores of grain. When is the one time during the Middle Kingdom era when Egypt kept track of stores of grain? There's only one time. Does it give you chills? Wow. This guy, Samuntu the Revered, was a scribe claiming to work for this king dude whose name I can't say, Amoni, they called him when he was a kid. Claiming to work for him, but actually serving Joseph as a record keeper in the store cities, whose names are also mentioned both in the Bible and in these documents. Ooh, that's cool. Yeah. There's no record of all. Yeah, actually there is. You can find it. It was first, some of these records were first dug up in 1908 by Flanders Petrie, and then in 1974, this is funny, underneath the statue of Ramses II, buried underneath the statue, these records were found and reassembled. Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. Well, these are the guys. Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and chief baker, and put them in the custody of the house of the captain of the guard in the prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned Joseph to them as their personal attendants. There's that word again. And so they were in custody for some time. While they're in jail, he is looking over their affairs. They're still wealthy people because they're still officials. They're still making investments. Joseph is looking all over those kinds of things. And Wendy, am I out of time? I have 3 minutes. All right. Well, the king of Egypt, I got one more thing to show you, and then we'll pick it up from next time. The king of Egypt's cupbearer and baker, who were confined in the prison, each had a dream. We're going to talk about the importance of dreams next time. Both had a dream on the same night, and each dream had its own meaning. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they looked distraught. This has always got me. These guys are in jail. Shouldn't they be distraught anyway? And Joseph is in jail. You know, do you know how hard it is when you feel really cruddy to notice that somebody else isn't feeling good? Do you know what I mean? Well, Wendy was in the hospital just feeling like, well, she was in the hospital. I got like sick. And I mean, I was feeling raunchy. Well, you guys heard me trying to preach. I was barely able to function. She didn't notice. And I don't fault her at all. She felt worse than me. How is she going to even notice? Joseph, listen, the baker made nasty food. The cupbaker tried it and said it's okay. It's their fault. They did it. Joseph is completely innocent. And he notices how someone else feels. Not only that, he is paying close enough attention. He is invested enough in these men to notice that something is different about them on this day. I don't know how many people he had to take care of in a stinky, it might have been Camp Cupcake, but it was still a stinky prison. And he paid enough attention to them. He gave himself away to them enough to be their servants enough that even though they were all in prison, he could tell, oh man, something's eating these guys that's different. Wow! Let me be like Joseph, who is so full of the hesed of God, the loving kindness of God, that it just leaks out of me, and that I can care about others even when I'm a mess. I can care more about others than myself. Does that sound like someone you know? Does that sound maybe like Jesus hanging on a cross, dying, hearing the man next to him call out for salvation, and he loves him enough. Yeah, I'm dying even for you, my friend. Wow. Isn't that cool? We're going to stop there. We're going to pause there. We're going to pick up this story next time. And it's just a fantastic story. So let's pick up that next time. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you. I thank you for this example and how I pray that we would be like Joseph, only so that we can be like you. Will you make us your followers?